Commercial airplanes fly higher than the summit of Mount Everest, where humans cannot breathe without oxygen. They cruise through temperatures cold enough to freeze your blood in seconds. The air is so thin that exposed skin would suffer frostbite almost instantly. Frostbite, for the beside. So why do airlines deliberately choose to operate in this hostile, deadly environment? The answer involves hidden economics, invisible wind rivers traveling at 400 miles per hour, and emergency procedures that could save hundreds of lives. Airlines spend millions of dollars optimizing every flight path, and altitude is their most powerful tool. By the end of this video, you will see flying in a completely different way. This is Sky Secrets. I am your guide at Sky Secrets, where we reveal the engineering and economics behind every flight. We have analyzed operational data from Delta, United, Emirates, and Lufthansa. We have consulted aerodynamic engineers and studied fuel burn rates at different altitudes. What you are about to learn is insider knowledge from the aviation industry itself. The first reason airplanes fly at extreme altitude is economic, and it is far more complex and important than you might imagine. Flying at high altitude helps save fuel, but not just a little. We are talking about massive amounts. Let me explain exactly how this works, because this is information airlines do not want you to understand in detail. At low altitude, air is extremely dense. This means the airplane must push against millions of air molecules to move forward. It is like trying to swim through honey instead of water. This phenomenon is called aerodynamic drag, and it is the #1 enemy of fuel efficiency. The engines have to work much harder, burning enormous quantities of fuel just to maintain speed. But at 33,000 feet, the situation changes dramatically. The air is approximately 75% less dense than at sea level. With fewer molecules obstructing forward movement, drag decreases significantly. Less drag means substantially less work for the engines. Less work means enormous fuel savings. And now prepare yourself for a fact that will leave you shocked. Fuel represents between 30 and 40% of all operational costs for an airline. To put this in perspective, a large airline can spend more than $10 million daily just on fuel. That is why any strategy to reduce consumption is not just about saving a little money. It means the difference between profitability and bankruptcy. But wait, there is more. During a transatlantic flight, a commercial airplane burns between 50 and 100 tons of fuel. This means the aircraft becomes significantly lighter during the journey. Pilots take advantage of this with a little-known technique called step climb. Instead of maintaining a constant altitude, the airplane climbs progressively as it becomes lighter. Each step upward means less resistance and more fuel savings. This technique alone can save thousands of dollars on a single long-distance flight. Think about it carefully. Now, if flying high reduces drag, why not fly even higher? Perhaps at 50,000 or 65,000 feet. The answer lies in the basic physics of jet engines and aerodynamics. Modern turbofan engines are machines of amazing engineering, but they have a fundamental weakness. They need oxygen to function. The process is simple in theory. The engine compresses air, mixes it with fuel, ignites it, and expels gases at high speed to generate thrust. The problem is that the higher you fly, the less oxygen is available. At 40,000 feet, oxygen concentration is barely 1/3 of what exists at sea level. If an airplane tried to fly too high, its engines would lose power dramatically to the point of shutting down due to lack of oxygen to maintain combustion. But there is another crucial factor: lift. Wings generate the force that keeps the airplane in the air by moving through air molecules. And But what happens when that air is extremely thin? At very high altitudes, wings lose efficiency because there are simply fewer air molecules to generate lift. The airplane would begin to have difficulties maintaining stable flight. That is why there exists a delicate balance between altitude and performance. The higher you go, the lower the drag. But engine power becomes limited by oxygen availability, and lift is affected by air density. This balance defines what engineers call the service ceiling of an aircraft, the maximum altitude at which it can operate efficiently and safely. There is something more fascinating that few people know. Airplanes do not just fly high to reduce drag. They also fly high to surf invisible highways in the sky. At cruising altitudes, there exist air currents called jet streams, which are true rivers of air that can reach astonishing speeds of up to 250 miles per hour. Imagine this scenario. You are piloting a Boeing 787 that flies at 560 miles per hour by its own means. Suddenly you enter a jet stream going in your same direction at 180 miles per hour. The result is that your ground speed shoots up to 740 miles per hour without needing to use a single extra gram of fuel. To help you understand with a concrete example, a transatlantic flight can shorten its time by up to 90 minutes by taking advantage of these currents, saving tons of fuel and significantly reducing operational costs. This is not theory. Airlines and air traffic controllers constantly study these currents to design routes that take maximum advantage of them. Have you ever noticed that flights heading east, for example from America to Europe, are usually faster than return flights? This is no coincidence. They are taking advantage of jet streams, which generally flow from west to east in the northern hemisphere. However, there is a negative side. If an airplane has to fly against a jet stream, the effect is exactly the opposite. Speed is reduced, flight time is extended, and fuel consumption increases considerably. That is why sometimes you will see your flight make an apparently illogical detour on the map. They are avoiding flying against these powerful currents. Now let us talk about something we have all experienced at some point: turbulence. Nobody likes those unexpected jolts that make the seatbelt signs light up, right? Well, flying high also has a crucial purpose here: avoiding most turbulence. The majority of chaotic weather occurs in the troposphere, the lowest layer of the atmosphere, where clouds, storms, and unstable winds form. This layer extends approximately to 30,000 or 33,000 feet of altitude. Does that sound familiar? Exactly. Commercial airplanes fly just above this turbulent zone. It is like sailing above a rough sea instead of going through it. But then, why do we sometimes experience turbulence even at high altitude? This is due to a phenomenon called clear air turbulence. Unlike turbulence associated with storms, this can appear without warning because it is not easily detected on weather radars. It is produced when masses of air at different temperatures or speeds meet, creating invisible but powerful vortices. That is why, even though the sky looks completely clear, pilots insist that we keep our seatbelts fastened. It is not paranoia. It is precaution based on science. Before continuing with the most important question about what happens when an airplane must fly lower than normal, give this video a like if you are learning something new, and subscribe to the Sky Secrets channel so you do not miss any fascinating detail from the world of aviation. Activating the bell means you will be the first to know about our next videos on aviation secrets that few people know. Sky Secrets brings you information you will not find anywhere else. Now imagine this scenario. You are on a flight and suddenly you notice that the clouds are no longer far below but around the airplane. The pilot announces they are descending to a lower altitude than usual. What does flying lower than normal really mean? When an airplane must fly at lower altitude, whether due to an emergency, airspace restrictions, or extreme weather conditions, several serious problems occur. First, fuel consumption skyrockets. As we already explained, denser air means greater drag. An airplane flying at 16,000 feet can consume up to 50% more fuel than at its optimal altitude. Second, exposure to turbulence and adverse weather conditions increases drastically. While at 33,000 feet, you are above most storms. At 16,000 feet, you are right in the middle of them. Third, and this is critical, modern commercial airplanes are designed specifically to be efficient at high altitudes. Their wings, fuselage, and engines are optimized for thin air at extreme heights. Flying very low for extended periods can cause accelerated wear on the entire structure due to greater aerodynamic pressure. It is like using a Ferrari to haul construction materials. It will work, but it is not what it was designed for. That is why, although in emergency situations airplanes can fly at lower altitude, pilots always try to return to optimal altitude as soon as possible. A crucial advantage of flying at high altitude that few people consider is the safety factor. When an airplane experiences some problem in full flight, such as engine failure, altitude becomes its best ally. Why? Because it gives extra time to react. At 33,000 feet, a commercial airplane can glide for more than 60 miles even without engine power. This gives the crew precious time to attempt to resolve the technical problem, search for a safe place to land, communicate with air traffic control, and prepare passengers. A case that perfectly exemplifies this advantage occurred in 1982 with British Airways Flight 009. In full flight over Indonesia, the airplane passed through a volcanic ash cloud coming from Mount Galung, something that weather radars could not detect at that time. The ash damaged all 4 engines of the Boeing 747, leaving it completely without propulsion at 36,000 feet of altitude. For 13 terrifying minutes, the crew had to glide the gigantic airplane while desperately trying to restart the engines. Thanks to the high initial altitude, they had enough time to perform multiple restart attempts while descending slowly. Finally, they managed to restart 3 of the 4 engines and make an emergency landing in Jakarta. All 263 people on board survived. If the airplane had been flying at lower altitude, the story would have had a very different outcome. So far we have seen why commercial airplanes fly so high, but a fascinating question arises. Why do they not fly even higher if flying high has so many advantages? What prevents current commercial airplanes from climbing beyond 40,000 feet? There are 3 fundamental limitations that aerospace engineers are trying to overcome. First limitation: oxygen scarcity. As we mentioned before, engines need oxygen for combustion. At higher altitude, lower oxygen availability. Currently, commercial engines reach their practical limit around 43,000 feet. Second limitation: loss of lift. Airplane wings are designed to generate lift by interacting with air. When air becomes too thin, wings lose efficiency and the airplane begins to experience stability problems. This can lead to a dangerous phenomenon known as coffin corner, a point where the minimum speed needed to maintain lift dangerously approaches the maximum speed the structure can withstand. Third and most important limitation: passenger safety. Commercial airplanes are pressurized to maintain a pressure equivalent to what exists at about 8,000 feet of altitude. If depressurization occurred at extreme altitudes, the time of useful consciousness, the time a person remains conscious without supplementary oxygen, would be drastically reduced. At 40,000 feet, Time of useful consciousness is approximately 15 to 20 seconds. At 50,000 feet, it is reduced to barely 5 to 10 seconds. This would barely give passengers time to put on oxygen masks before losing consciousness. The next time you board a flight and feel that airplane climbing higher and higher, you will no longer see it as just another routine procedure. You will understand the invisible jet streams being surfed, the fuel calculations being optimized, the safety margins being maintained, and the engineering brilliance keeping hundreds of tons of metal suspended 7 miles above Earth. Your perspective on flying has changed forever, and knowledge like this separates informed travelers from the rest. Show your support by smashing that like button if you learned something valuable today. Subscribe to Sky Secrets and join thousands of viewers who refuse to stay in the dark about aviation. We are building a community of people who want to understand the real science behind every flight. Activate notifications so you are first to see our next deep dive into aviation secrets. Comment below with your biggest takeaway from this video. Let us know what blew your mind the most.